Okay, I have a question. Does history prove Jesus' crucifixion? And really, is the history of Jesus being real?
That's a
Does that
powerful
matter?
question. While historical evidence strongly supports the existence of Jesus and his crucifixion by Pontius Pilate, much of the discussion around it involves both historical records and interpretations of biblical prophecies. The key is how these sources are understood and the weight given to different types of evidence, like historical texts versus religious scriptures. Do
Okay.
you want to explore how historians approach this topic or how it ties to the conversation with sparothesisy?
Well, it's... Oh, yeah, thesisy. I didn't even think of that, but sparrow the sissy, I think it is, or thesisy. Oh, okay. I didn't even think about that. But yes, I want to go over a conversation that I had in the comments with Sparrow the Sissy. And I guess I wanted to prove, and from my side, I wanted to prove that Jesus did exist, and history stated it was, and scholars completely agree that yes, he did exist. There was no question of that. However, can you just go over with what Sparrow said about, okay, that's fine, but what about the other stuff?
Sure. Sparothesisy acknowledges that Jesus likely existed and was crucified, but argues that this historical fact doesn't validate the supernatural claims in the Gospels. They suggest that, like with other historical figures such as Julius Caesar, stories about Jesus could have been exaggerated over time. They also highlight differences in Gospel accounts, like the Legion demon story, as potential examples of embellishment, questioning the reliability of the Gospels in reporting miraculous events. Their main point is that historical existence doesn't automatically confirm supernatural beliefs.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Now, I tried to prove a point with Psalm 22. And this basically, I feel, this Psalm 22 was written, 700 or so years before Christ, and it predicts, it's a prophecy of him being on the cross. However, Sparrow kind of said, well, there is one verse there where it says his hands are pierced, but can you just go over that a little bit more, just to give a bit of context, but just in short, please?
Certainly. Psalm 22 is often seen by Christians as a prophecy of Jesus' crucifixion, written centuries before his time.
Yes.
The verse in question, Psalm 22, verse 16, traditionally reads, "They have pierced my hands and my feet." This imagery closely matches the crucifixion, where Jesus' hands and feet were nailed to the cross. However, there's a translation debate. The Hebrew Masoretic text, which most Jewish Bibles are based on, reads, "like a lion at my hands and feet," which some argue doesn't directly reference crucifixion. On the other hand, the Greek Septuagint and some Dead Sea Scrolls versions support pierced, which aligns with the Christian interpretation. Sparothesisy's point is that if the original text says, "like a lion," it may not be directly predicting crucifixion. Despite this, the overall imagery in Psalm 22, with details of suffering, mockery, and the casting of lots for clothing, still strongly resonates with the crucifixion narrative in the New Testament.
Which is what my point is, that let's just say that one verse, which I think is Psalm 22, verse 16, instead of saying pierced, it says, "like a lion they are surrounding me," I think it is, which still has that vision about it. But I guess the thing is Psalm 22, verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That is straight up with Jesus on the cross saying that, referencing it back, because in the Hebrew tradition, they wouldn't say Psalm 22, they would say the first line of that psalm so that you knew it, because it was like a memory thing. It's like when you're like a song, your favourite song, and you just need to say the first line and everybody knows exactly, or even the chorus, they know exactly what song it is. That's all they needed to say, or what Jesus needed to say, to let the people of Israel, the Jewish scholars of the day, know exactly what was happening. So they could see everything in this verse happening around them, and they're just going, what the... And that was the point of this. And there's Psalm 22, verse 7 and 8. "All who sees me mocks me." All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord. They say, let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Again, this happens again. So really changing that one verse out of that whole chapter of Psalm 22, it doesn't change a thing.
Your point is that even if the specific verse in Psalm 22:16 says like a lion instead of pierced,
Yes.
the overall context of Psalm 22 still strongly aligns with the crucifixion of Jesus.
Not to mention,
you highlight that Jesus himself referenced Psalm 22:1,
yes.
my God, why have you forsaken me? While on the cross, which would have immediately brought the entire psalm to the minds of those familiar with it.
And standing there
In
right
Jewish
there in front of
tradition,
him.
quoting
Yes.
the first line of a psalm was a way to evoke the entire passage, much like how we might recognize a song by its opening line.
Isn't this
By
what I
saying
said?
this, Jesus was pointing people to Psalm.
And yeah, there are so many different other verses and other psalms and other things prophesying Jesus. Now, the other point is, you were saying, Sparrow was saying that over time, people have written things, say like in Mark, and then they say the same story in Matthew, and it seems more embellished. And really, a lot of times when this has come up, it's actually more complimentary, and I'll explain why. And it's the same as the one angel or two angels in Matthew and Mark. I think it's Matthew and Mark. And yeah, and there seems to be this issue with if it says one man that is possessed that Jesus talks to, and then all the demons go off into the pigs. And then in, I think it's Matthew, there are two people that are possessed and the same story. And yet, I mean, why would that be different?
The difference between the accounts in Mark and Matthew, where Mark mentions one demon-possessed man and Matthew mentions two, has been a topic of discussion among scholars and believers. Here are a few points to consider. 1. Different perspectives or sources. The gospel writers may have been drawing from different sources or traditions. Mark might have focused on the most prominent individual in the story, while Matthew may have included both people to provide a fuller account. 2. Theological emphasis. Each gospel writer had different theological goals. Matthew often emphasizes the idea of two witnesses, because in Jewish law, two witnesses were required to establish a fact, Deuteronomy 19:15. By mentioning two men, Matthew could be emphasizing the legitimacy and significance of the miracle. Complementary accounts. Some view the differences as complementary rather than contradictory. Both accounts describe the same essential event: Jesus casting out a legion of demons into a herd of pigs. The variations don't necessarily negate the truth of the event, but highlight different details that each author wanted to convey.
I find it so interesting that in Matthew, we seem to have one man that is possessed and that Jesus talks to and casts the demons out. And I think, am I right in saying that then when the women go to the tomb, there is one angel, whereas in Matthew, there is two in both of those accounts? Is that because of this tradition for having two witnesses? So he kind of emphasizes that. And whereas in Matthew, he just wants to tell the story and just focus on the one thing, like the one angel or the one man that is possessed. Is that what's being said here? That's amazing.
You're touching on an interesting observation about the differences between the gospel accounts. Let's clarify the points you're raising. 1. Possessed men in Mark and Matthew. Mark 5:1-20 mentions one demon-possessed man. Matthew 8:24 mentions two demon-possessed men. Angels at the tomb. Mark 16:5 describes one angel, a young man dressed in a white robe. Matthew 28 describes two angels. Emphasis on two witnesses in Matthew. You're correct in noting that Matthew often emphasizes the presence of two witnesses, which ties back to the Jewish legal tradition where two witnesses were required to establish a fact. Deuteronomy 19:15. This tradition was significant in Jewish culture for validating events. So Matthew's gospel sometimes includes details that align with this legal emphasis. Focus in Mark's gospel tends to be more concise and action-oriented.
That is so interesting. I find that amazing. And that even gives more to the story, that Matthew is just trying to be a little bit more legal. So he's going, well, I am going to add the other person that was there. And yeah, I just think that is totally, totally amazing. And I just want to thank you for joining me. And I've got so many other questions. And if you've got a question and you think, all right, I don't believe you, then just write in the comments. We'll go over this, and hopefully Cosmo will be starting to work. But thank you so much. Click on there for another one of these. Go do something awesome for God, and I'll catch you in the next one.